What happens when a beloved country music icon walks onto a talk show set, expecting a friendly chat about her new album, only to find herself face to face with a host determined to drag her through the mud of political controversy? What you're about to witness is one of the most jaw-dropping moments in daytime television history, where Joy Behar thought she could steamroll over Reba McEntire, but instead got served a reality check that left her speechless and the audience gasping. This is the story of how one of country music's most respected voices turned the tables on a host who clearly underestimated her guest. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because you're going to want to discuss this absolute train wreck after you see what happens. The morning started like any other at the View studios. Reba McEntire had arrived early, her trademark red hair perfectly styled, wearing an elegant navy blazer that commanded respect. She'd been invited on the show to discuss her upcoming tour and new music, something she'd done dozens of times on various programs throughout her decades-long career. But as she sat in the green chair, adjusting her microphone, she had no idea that Joy Behar had other plans entirely. "We're back in 30 seconds, called out the floor manager as the crew bustled around the set. Reba smiled warmly at the other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg giving her an encouraging nod. She'd always enjoyed appearing on The View, finding the conversation lively and the audience welcoming. Today felt different, though. There was a tension in the air she couldn't quite place. "And we're live in 3, 2. The floor manager pointed at the cameras as the familiar theme music faded out. "Welcome back to The View," Joy announced with her characteristic sharp smile. "We're here with country music legend Reba McEntire, who's got a new tour coming up. But before we talk about music, Reba, I think our audience would love to know where you stand on some of the issues that really matter to working families across America." Reba's smile faltered slightly. This wasn't the direction she'd expected the conversation to take. "Well, Joy, I'm really here to talk about my music and connect with the fans who've supported me all these years." "Oh, come on now," Joy pressed, leaning forward with that look in her eyes that regular viewers knew meant trouble. "You've got a platform, you've got influence. Surely you have opinions about what's happening in our country. I mean, your fan base is largely conservative, rural America, right? The same people who've been voting against their own interests for years." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Even Whoopi raised an eyebrow at Joy's aggressive opening. Reba sat back slightly, her posture straightening. Years of performing had taught her how to read a room, and she could feel this one turning hostile. "Joy, I think you might be making some assumptions about my fans that aren't fair," Reba replied calmly. "My audience is made up of all kinds of people, from all walks of life. They're teachers, nurses, farmers, business owners, military families. They're good people who work hard and love their families. But let's be honest here," Joy interrupted. "These are the same people who support policies that hurt working women, that take away reproductive rights, that deny climate change. How do you reconcile entertaining people whose values are so backwards?" The studio fell silent, except for the quiet hum of cameras. Reba's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but when she spoke, her voice remained steady and controlled. "Joy, I think you're confusing political stereotypes with real human beings. The people who come to my concerts aren't defined by how you think they vote. They're mothers worried about their children's futures, fathers working 2 jobs to make ends meet, young people trying to find their place in the world." "That's a nice deflection," Joy shot back, clearly not satisfied with the diplomatic response. "But we both know that country music has a problem with diversity, with inclusion. Your genre has historically excluded voices of color, and even now, the industry struggles with representation. Don't you think you have a responsibility to use your platform to call out these systemic issues?" Reba's eyes flashed, and for the first time, viewers could see the steel underneath the Southern charm. "Joy, I think you need to do your homework before you start making accusations. Country music has always been influenced by blues, gospel, and folk traditions that come from all communities. Artists like Charlie Pride, Darius Rucker, Mickey Guyton, Kane Brown. These aren't tokens. They're talented artists who've earned their place. But historically, Joy pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the warning signs that she was pushing too far. The country music establishment has been exclusionary. And frankly, your silence on social justice issues speaks volumes. When Black Lives Matter was at its peak, where was Reba McEntire's voice? The temperature in the studio seemed to drop 10 degrees. Reba leaned forward, her voice still controlled but with an edge that made everyone pay attention. My silence? Joy, you clearly haven't been paying attention to my career or my actions. I've spent 40 years supporting charitable causes, building programs for underprivileged youth, and using my platform to help people regardless of their background. But I don't feel the need to announce every good deed on social media for political points. Joy's face was reddening now, realizing that her usual tactics of intimidation weren't working. Well, it's convenient that you can hide behind charity work instead of taking real political stands. Your fans deserve to know where you stand on the issues that affect their daily lives. And what makes you think they don't know? Reba's voice was getting stronger now, her Oklahoma roots showing through. You're sitting here telling me what my fans think, what they believe, what they deserve. But when's the last time you actually talked to any of them? When's the last time you visited a small town in America, sat down with families who are struggling, and actually listened instead of lecturing? The other hosts exchanged glances. This was not going according to Joy's plan. Whoopi cleared her throat, sensing the need to intervene. But Joy was too far committed to her attack to back down now. I don't need to visit small-town America to understand that your fan base consistently votes for politicians who undermine women's rights, environmental protection, and social progress, Joy declared, her voice rising. And your refusal to condemn those choices makes you complicit in perpetuating harmful systems. That was the moment everything changed. Reba's entire demeanor shifted, and suddenly the sweet country singer was gone, replaced by a woman who'd built an empire through sheer determination and wasn't about to let anyone tear down her life's work or insult the people who'd supported her journey. Reba set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision, the small clink against the table cutting through the tension like a knife. When she looked back up at Joy, there was something in her eyes that made the entire studio hold its breath. This wasn't the polite guest who'd walked in that morning. This was a woman who'd survived decades in the entertainment industry by knowing exactly when to stand her ground. Joy, let me tell you something about complicity, Reba began, her voice calm but carrying the weight of barely contained fury. Complicity is sitting in your comfortable studio in New York City, making 6 figures to judge people you've never met, while pretending you speak for working families. Complicity is assuming that anyone who doesn't share your exact political views is automatically stupid or evil. Joy's mouth opened to interrupt, but Reba held up a hand that commanded silence. No. You've had your say. Now it's my turn. You want to talk about my fans? Let me tell you about Sarah from Tennessee, a single mother working 3 jobs who saved for months to bring her daughter to my concert because music helps them forget their troubles for a few hours. Or maybe we should discuss Frank from Iowa, a veteran dealing with PTSD who finds peace in songs that remind him of home. These are real people with real struggles, not the cartoon villains you've painted them to be. The audience was completely silent now, some leaning forward in their seats. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, afraid to miss a moment of this unexpected showdown. Joy tried to regain control, her voice slightly shaky. Look, I'm not attacking your fans personally, but we can't ignore the broader political implications of... The broader political implications? Reba's voice cut through Joy's attempt at damage control, like a hot knife through butter. You mean the implications of a coastal elite telling Middle America what they should think and feel? The implications of dismissing entire communities because they don't vote the way you want them to? Whoopi finally tried to step in. Ladies, maybe we should. No, Whoopi. Let her finish, Joy said, though her bravado was clearly cracking. I want to hear how Reba justifies staying silent while her platform could be used to educate people on important social issues. Reba's laugh was sharp and cold. Educate people? Joy. You're sitting here assuming that anyone who doesn't echo your talking points needs to be educated. That's not education. That's indoctrination. And frankly, it's insulting to millions of Americans who are perfectly capable of thinking for themselves. But surely you must see that some issues are black and white. Joy pressed on, sweat now visible on her forehead. Human rights, equality, basic decency. These aren't political opinions. They're moral imperatives. You're absolutely right. Reba agreed. And for a moment Joy looked relieved. They are moral imperatives. Which is why I find it so troubling that you think you have a monopoly on morality. Let me ask you something, Joy. When's the last time you visited a food bank in rural America? When's the last time you volunteered at a homeless shelter outside of Manhattan? When's the last time you actually rolled up your sleeves and helped the communities you claim to care so much about? Joy's face was turning a deeper shade of red. I support numerous charities and causes. Writing checks from your penthouse is not the same thing as understanding people's lives. Reba interrupted. You sit here every day, pontificating about what's wrong with America, but you've isolated yourself in a bubble of people who think exactly like you do. How can you possibly understand what working families need when you haven't lived their reality in decades? The other hosts were now visibly uncomfortable. This had gone far beyond a typical heated discussion into something much more personal and devastating. I resent the implication that I'm out of touch, Joy snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. I grew up working class. I understand struggle. Did you? Reba's question hung in the air like a challenge. Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've forgotten where you came from. You've traded your authenticity for applause lines, and your compassion for cheap political points. That woman who grew up working class would be ashamed of what you've become. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, clearly searching for a comeback that wouldn't come. You want to talk about using platforms responsibly? Reba continued, her voice gaining momentum. Then, let's talk about how you use yours. Every day, you come on this show and spread division, painting half the country as enemies instead of fellow Americans with different perspectives. You've turned political discourse into a blood sport, and then you have the audacity to lecture others about unity and understanding. That's not... I don't, Joy stammered. Completely off balance now. We discuss important issues here. We hold people accountable. No, Joy. You don't hold people accountable. You attack them. There's a difference. Reba's words were surgical in their precision. Accountability requires good faith engagement with different viewpoints. What you do is character assassination dressed up as social justice. You've weaponized moral outrage to silence anyone who doesn't conform to your worldview. Joy looked around desperately, seeking support from her co-hosts, but found only uncomfortable silence. Even her usual allies seemed stunned by the thoroughness of Reba's dismantling of her arguments. I think, Joy tried weakly, that we're getting off track here. This was supposed to be about your music. Oh no, Reba said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You opened this door, Joy. You decided that instead of talking about music, you wanted to have a political confrontation. You assumed that because I'm from Oklahoma and sing country music, I'd be an easy target for your usual routine. But here's the thing about assumptions. They make you look foolish when you're wrong. The audience was starting to murmur now, some nodding in agreement with Reba's points. Joy could feel the room slipping away from her, the control she'd wielded for years suddenly evaporating before her eyes. You're twisting my words, Joy said desperately. I never said you were an easy target. Didn't you? Reba leaned back in her chair, completely in command now. From the moment this segment started, you've talked down to me, made assumptions about my fans, questioned my values, and demanded I justify my existence to your satisfaction. If that's not treating someone like an easy target, then I don't know what is. Joy's hands were visibly shaking now as she reached for her water glass, her carefully constructed facade crumbling in real time. The woman who'd built a career on cutting down guests with sharp wit and political righteousness was discovering what it felt like to be on the receiving end of a truly devastating takedown. You know what the real tragedy is here, Joy? Reba continued, her voice now carrying the weight of disappointment rather than anger. You had an opportunity today to have a genuine conversation with someone who's spent 4 decades connecting with people across this country. Instead, you chose to turn it into an ambush because you thought it would make for good television. I wasn't ambushing anyone, Joy protested weakly, but her voice lacked any conviction. I was asking legitimate questions about important issues. No, you weren't asking questions, Reba corrected her with surgical precision. You were making statements disguised as questions. There's a difference between, what are your thoughts on social issues, and how do you justify entertaining people whose values are backwards? One invites dialogue, the other is an accusation wrapped in a question mark. The other co-hosts sat in stunned silence, watching their colleague get systematically dismantled by someone they'd clearly underestimated. The audience was hanging on every word, many nodding in agreement with Reba's points. But surely, Joy tried one more desperate attempt to regain footing. You can understand why people might want to know where celebrities stand on important issues. Of course I can understand that, Reba replied, her tone almost pitying now. But there's a respectful way to explore those topics. And then there's what you did today. You assumed the worst about me and my fans from the very first question. You didn't want to understand my perspective. You wanted to expose what you believed were my flaws. Joy's face was now a mottled red, her breathing shallow. That's not true. I respect diverse viewpoints. Reba's laugh was soft but cutting. Joy, in the 15 minutes we've been talking, you've called my fans backwards, accused me of being complicit in harmful systems, suggested my industry is racist, and questioned my moral character. If that's your idea of respecting diverse viewpoints, I'd hate to see what disrespect looks like. The studio audience was no longer silent. Quiet murmurs of agreement with Reba were becoming audible, and Joy could sense the room completely turning against her. You're putting words in my mouth, Joy said, her voice cracking slightly. I never called your fans backwards. Didn't you? Reba pulled out her phone and glanced at it as if reading something. I believe your exact words were that they vote against their own interests and support backwards values. Would you like me to ask the producers to roll back the footage? Joy's eyes went wide with panic. She'd been so focused on her attack that she hadn't realized how damning her own words had sounded when thrown back at her. I was speaking generally about voting patterns, Joy stammered. Not making personal attacks. Joy, stop. Reba's voice was firm but not unkind. Just stop. You're embarrassing yourself now. Own what you said instead of trying to walk it back. At least have the courage of your convictions. The silence that followed was deafening. Joy sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, clearly out of ammunition and ideas. For perhaps the first time in her television career, she was completely and utterly speechless. You know what I think happened here today? Reba said, filling the silence with a voice that commanded the entire studio's attention. I think you've been in your bubble so long that you forgot there are intelligent, thoughtful people who might see the world differently than you do. You've surrounded yourself with people who applaud every political talking point you make. And it's made you lazy in your thinking. Joy tried to speak, but only managed a weak, I don't think that's fair. Fair? Reba's eyebrows rose. Joy, you've spent this entire interview being unfair. You've been condescending, presumptuous, and frankly, quite rude. I came here as your guest, and you've treated me like a defendant in some moral courtroom where you've appointed yourself as judge and jury. Whoopi finally found her voice, though it was strained. No, Reba said firmly, holding up her hand. I think the audience deserves to see how this ends. Joy started something here, and she should see it through to its conclusion. Joy looked around desperately, seeking an escape route, but finding none. The cameras were still rolling. The audience was watching intently, and her co-hosts were offering no assistance. I just want people to think critically about the issues that affect their lives, Joy said weakly, making one last attempt to salvage something from this disaster. And there it is, Reba said with a sad smile. You want people to think critically, as long as they reach the same conclusions you have. That's not critical thinking, Joy. That's indoctrination. Critical thinking means being open to the possibility that reasonable people can examine the same information and reach different conclusions. Joy's head dropped slightly. The fight completely gone out of her. She looked like a deflated balloon, all the air and arrogance that had filled her just minutes before, now completely absent. Here's what I want people to understand, Reba said, her voice taking on the warm, caring tone that had made her beloved by millions. We don't have to agree on everything to treat each other with respect. We don't have to share the same political views to recognize each other's humanity. But what we saw here today, this assumption that anyone who thinks differently must be evil or stupid, that's what's really destroying our country. The studio audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to a sustained ovation. Joy sat motionless, staring at her hands, completely humiliated and defeated. I came here to talk about music, Reba concluded as the applause died down. Because music brings people together. It crosses political lines, economic boundaries, and cultural divides. Maybe if we had more of that kind of thinking and less of what we witnessed here today, we'd all be better off. Joy finally looked up, her eyes glassy with unshed tears of embarrassment and rage. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, realizing that anything she said would only make her situation worse. The cameras captured every moment of her humiliation. The woman who'd made a career of humiliating others, now experiencing the other side of that equation in the most public way possible. As the segment mercifully came to an end, viewers were left with an image they wouldn't soon forget. Joy Behar sitting in stunned silence, while Reba McEntire had delivered one of the most devastating and articulate takedowns in daytime television history. That's exactly what happened when Joy Behar thought she could intimidate and lecture a true American icon. What you just witnessed was a masterclass in how to stand up to a bully with grace, intelligence, and unshakable dignity. Reba didn't just win that confrontation. She exposed the hollow nature of Joy's entire approach to political discourse. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible moments like this, and let me know in the comments, who do you think came out looking worse in this exchange? Joy for her obvious bias and condescension, or the producers for allowing it to happen in the first place?